TrickBot's got a new trick up its sleeve, and it's named Diavol.
Hey, John, I hear you had something about a TrickBot, some kind of new update to it.
Yeah, thanks, Manish. So, we've talked about TrickBot on the show in the past, and TrickBot probably came out maybe around, I guess, like 2016 timeframe. Maybe not, maybe 2018. I always get it mixed up. But in any event, TrickBot's been around for a while, and it kind of preliminarily came out as a banking Trojan for the most part, targeting people as a banking malware, trying to get their banking credentials. It's since moved in over the past few years into ransomware. There's a threat actor group that has been colloquially dubbed Wizard Spider. I think all the Russian-based threat actors are in the Spider family. But Wizard Spider that are behind the TrickBot malware, they've been recently linked to a new strain of ransomware called Diavol. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, Diavol. And this particular ransomware has a lot of similarities from what they can see to the Conti ransomware, which also is from the same group, Wizard Spider. And its ransom note reuses a lot of language from the Gregor ransomware, which I don't think is related to them, but is also another Russian origin piece of ransomware. The thing interesting, I guess another interesting aside about a lot of these ransomware strains and TrickBot in general is that, when TrickBot was first released, one of the things that some of the malware analysts noticed really quickly is that it was specifically programmed to uninstall itself if it detected that the system that it was executing on uses the Russian language as its primary language set, or if it had an IP address in the Soviet Union. So that's pretty interesting that, this group, Wizard Spider, behind this families of ransomware and malware, that they're, conscious of the fact that they actually intentionally going out of their way not to infect Russian-based systems. So that's interesting as well. So with respect to this Diavol ransomware, like I said, it has some similarities to Conti, which is another ransomware family. There's only one incident known to date that they've actually seen, so it's not like we've seen this widespread. This story came out on July 1st, so we might see more as we go along here. It's not clear, why only one so far has been seen as a, real infection at a particular company. And the other interesting thing about it is that the encryption, usually with a lot of these ransomware families, when they encrypt the files on disk, they'll usually use a symmetric key algorithm for their encryption. So with a symmetric key, you might have a password, and that's how you encrypt the files and use that same password to decrypt. So that would be a symmetric one. But with asymmetric, which is what Diavol uses, there's a public and private key. So you might encrypt it with the public key, and you need the private key to decrypt it, or vice versa, in order to do. And the way there's trade-offs with that. So using an asymmetric encryption algorithm, which uses a public-private key pair, it's a lot slower because it's more computationally expensive to do that. But it's also more secure versus, the password-based, one password symmetric key algorithm. That's very quick to encrypt. But now the malware itself has to know the password. So it's kind of easy to get that password as well if you're reverse engineering, assuming it doesn't go get it from some centralized server and that's not encrypted as well. So, I guess, long story short, they're using asymmetric encryption algorithms, which is kind of unusual in most ransomware cases, because usually the bad guys want to encrypt all the files on the disk as quickly as possible. This is going to slow down that process and make it take longer to do that. So that's interesting as an aside. And then one other thing that the article was discussing is that TrickBot recently, they've noticed that they've brought back into the TrickBot malware code TrickBot, incidentally, is what delivered this Diavol ransomware strain, but it kind of drops it along the way as part of its infection process. But the TrickBot malware itself has integrated back in a banking fraud module, very similar to, if people remember, Zeus. So remember the old Zeus malware, which was also a banking Trojan. When you go to a website, they would inject certain input fields into, so you go to my bank, mybank.com, and maybe they ask for my login ID and password. They could inject another field that has like a social security number or something as another field onto the web form. And they would harvest that information from the user because maybe they need it for something else, or maybe a PIN code or something they would ask for. And you as the user, you don't really understand why was my bank asking me for this now, but it looks legitimate because it's appearing on a legitimate website. So they're kind of injecting it in between the whole process.
So, like we know that TrickBot's like a modular malware, right? And I think that the inject DLL, if I remember correctly, was just recently updated by the by the people that coded it. And is that what?
Right.
That's one of the things that they added to it, I guess.
Right. They actually had it there before, and they recently added it back in again. This web inject module that allows them to inject these forms onto the page. So there's some thought that maybe they're going to shift maybe more back to banking Trojan work, or in addition to the ransomware. Who knows? I don't know. Whatever. I'm trying to read the tea leaves of how the bad guys think. It's just maybe another indicator that they're going to segue back to, doing that kind of banking Trojan, harvesting credentials from users, kind of sitting in the background silently as malware running and harvesting login credentials and other information using that web inject module in order to steal login information.
Yeah, so, using that web inject module, right? Obviously you can also use that to probably grab credentials that might be stored in the browser or anything, kind of just man in the middle itself and grab anything from the browser. Do you know if that's the case?
I haven't studied it myself in great detail, but probably, I think that module is mostly responsible for inserting and harvesting stuff off of the page that it does. I don't know that it's stealing credentials out of the browser, but it might be, or that might be another module. I'm not sure.
Because I was just kind of thinking, you mentioned what they might be planning for, right? So if you're able to grab those credentials, right? So, I think with the ransomware that we've been seeing is, part of the ransomware attacks have been the extortion schemes, right? So if you're able to get these credentials from these people, as you're grabbing the traffic or whatever, you may be able to log in using them and grab other information from them, even down to like the smaller, an individual grabbing like their Facebook credentials, their email credentials and things like that. And even on a smaller scale, maybe, extorting them for, smaller amounts of money and things like that. And that could also be part of the reason why they may be using the asymmetric key, which takes a little bit longer, is because you've already been able to grab a lot of the information to extort that information from them, and, and extort any sort of money from them. That might help you in having them pay out. And even if it does take you longer to encrypt their data, you still have access to them, using the legitimate credentials that you've stolen.
Right. Another thing about the legitimate credentials that maybe they might use this for is, a lot of the ransomware we've seen lately, they'll move laterally. So,
right.
The early days of ransomware, they would target an individual's machine. More so lately, within the past 6 months to a year, they try to move laterally to the file servers or some other more strategic centralized store of data inside a company. Encrypt that and hold that for ransom because they know they're going to get more money for that. So if I'm a bad guy and I've got, my TrickBot malware running this web inject module on a system administrator's machine, and he doesn't know he's infected, and he's been logging into, various work-related things for the past 2 weeks, now I've got all these legitimate system administrator credentials as a bad guy that I could use to laterally move into other parts of the company potentially. So, that would be something that, it's a possibility. I'm not saying that that's why they're doing it, but
right.
That would be a concern I would have.
I wonder if, just thinking back on that whole web inject, as you guys were talking, I wonder if it has also to do with trying to take advantage of the autofill features of a browser. Because we have a ton of like browser plugins that do the autofill stuff. So I'm wondering if you put in additional fields that are not normally there, and somebody is very accustomed to using their autofill, the autofill is going to fill in the information into those boxes based on what those field names are, right? So if it's asking for social and you just so happen to have your autofill information filled out with your social or the last four of your credit card or whatever it may be, it might just get populated into those fields and then you submit it, right? I mean, just trying to think through
Potentially,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that with a lot of websites you go to where you go to buy something and you put in your name, and then it like automatically fills in your full street address and address because it knows about those fields, like because it's remembered that.
Right.
So you're right. That could be part of that as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so I guess long story short, there's another variation, yet another ransomware family related to this one group, and named Diavol. So we'll see if we start to see more occurrences of this, and if it becomes more prevalent, like some of the other ones we talked about, like Revel and Conti and Ryak and all these other ones.